The phrase hung in the air like an unsheathed sword, quiet, sharp, impossible to ignore. Among others. She had said. Nathaniel Keene, CEO of a billion-dollar enterprise, couldn't stop replaying those two words in his mind. Clarissa had already gone back to her cart, adjusting her gloves and reaching for her spray bottle like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spoken flawless Mandarin in a lobby full of high-ranking international guests. Like she wasn't standing at the very center of the company's heartbeat, completely overlooked until now. He found himself staring at her, unsure of what to say. He was used to power lunches, elevator pitches, and venture capital negotiations, not being humbled by the janitor in his own building. Wait, he said a bit too loudly. Clarissa paused. Keene walked closer. What do you mean? Among others? Clarissa looked at him, her face unreadable. I speak 9 languages, she replied calmly. I learned them over time, some from people, some from books, some out of survival. The German executives were still nearby, clearly intrigued. Nathaniel's tone turned skeptical. 9 languages? She nodded, unbothered. English, Spanish, Mandarin, French, Swahili, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian. And ASL, he blinked. Sign language? Clarissa raised her hands and signed. Yes, I can sign as well. One of the German guests chuckled in admiration and whispered to Keene. She could run your entire international division better than half your department heads. Clarissa didn't smile. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. This was just her truth. A truth no one had cared to ask about for over a decade. But now, it was out. Nathaniel Keene didn't know what to do with this information. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because it came from someone his entire system was designed to ignore. Where did you go to school? He asked. Clarissa looked up at him without shame. Nowhere fancy. I took night classes. Online. Courses. I used to borrow language CDs from the library when I could. He blinked. So you're self-taught? She nodded. Most of it. He fell silent. That didn't fit into his framework of success. His world was filled with Ivy League credentials and startup pedigrees, not janitors who built multilingual fluency with used books and night shifts. How long have you worked here? 13 years, she replied without hesitation. Keene exhaled sharply. His brain was moving, calculating, dissecting, but no number crunched in his favor. This wasn't a human resource anomaly. This was a blind spot. His blind spot, and it had a name, Clarissa. Suddenly, someone cleared their throat behind them. It was Paul Nathaniel's executive assistant standing awkwardly with a tablet in hand. We're running late for the conference room meeting, he said cautiously. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on Clarissa. Then finally, would you be willing to join us upstairs? Just for 10 minutes. There's a translation document I'd like your opinion on. Clarissa hesitated. Sir, I'm not part of the company like that. I'm just, you're not just anything. He cut her off, but his voice was soft. You're someone I've clearly underestimated. That word underestimated landed harder than it should have. Not because he meant it cruelly, but because it felt like the first honest word anyone in power had ever said to her. She looked down at her gloves, at her mop, then back at the man she had cleaned around for years. All right, she said quietly. 10 minutes. Upstairs in the glass-walled executive meeting room, a group of senior-level managers looked genuinely confused when Clarissa walked in behind. Nathaniel, she wore the same uniform, carried nothing in her hands, and stood with calm composure. Keene handed her a printed document, an internal proposal translated into 4 languages, meant to be sent out to international partners later that day. Clarissa's eyes moved swiftly. Across the text, her fingers slid along the lines as she read. She made no sound, no face, just absorbed it. Then she spoke. This Mandarin translation is literal, but the phrasing is wrong. It's technically accurate, but culturally offensive. You'd insult the Beijing office with that tone. Asterisk, she continued, pointing out a grammar mistake in the Portuguese section, a clunky sentence in the Spanish, and an entire miscommunication. In the French version that could collapse the investor pitch, silence, then slowly, applause from the German partners, from two internal advisors. Asterisk, even Paul the stone-faced assistant nodded, eyes wide. Asterisk, Clarissa gently handed the paper. Back. Asterisk, is there anything else? She asked. King shook his head, unable to form words. She nodded and turned to leave, expecting that to be it, that she had served her 10 minutes and would now return to being invisible. Asterisk. But she was wrong. Asterisk, that moment would travel faster than any email, because someone powerful had finally seen something priceless, and this time, he wouldn't be silent about it. Asterisk. It was a cold Wednesday afternoon when Ava received the call from Margaret's personal assistant, not Michael. Not even his sister or father? Margaret had summoned her. Asterisk, Mrs. Mitchell requests your presence for afternoon tea, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Sharp. Asterisk, there was no question in the assistant's tone. It wasn't an invitation, it was a declaration. Ava smirked as she ended the call. She'd seen corporate power plays before, but this was something else. This wasn't business. This was legacy warfare. And Margaret Mitchell was preparing her first official strike. Asterisk, the following day, Ava arrived 5 minutes early. She wore navy blue, strong, bold, and impossible to ignore. Her heels echoed across the same polished marble she had walked on weeks ago, only this time she wasn't nervous. She was ready. Asterisk, Margaret was already seated in the drawing room, her hands folded over a delicate linen napkin, her expression calm and unreadable. Asterisk, you're punctual, she said. I admire that. Asterisk, I don't believe in wasting time, Ava replied. Her tone neutral. Asterisk, tea was poured, the porcelain clinked, and silence hung heavy. For 5 minutes, nothing was said. Just two women sipping from fine china, one clinging to old-world control, the other holding back the storm within. Asterisk, then Margaret reached into the side drawer of a cherrywood table and pulled out an envelope. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with the Mitchell family crest. Asterisk, I assume you know what this is, she said, sliding it across the table. Asterisk, Ava didn't touch it. A love letter? Asterisk, Margaret gave the faintest smirk. You're clever, but no, it's a prenuptial agreement. Standard practice, of course. Protection for the Mitchell name and assets? Asterisk, and Michael knows? Ava asked without blinking. I've spoken to him, Margaret replied, sipping her tea. He wasn't thrilled, but he understands. We have a duty to protect our lineage. I'm sure your mother would agree. Asterisk, Ava's fingers curled under the table. Protect your lineage? From what, exactly? Asterisk, Margaret's smile thinned. From disappointment, from manipulation, from ... surprises. Asterisk, there it was. The racism dressed in velvet, the classism sprinkled in lace. Margaret wasn't saying Ava was unworthy, she was implying Ava was dangerous because she didn't come from them. Because her skin, her background, her silence, all felt unpredictable. Asterisk, Ava finally picked up the envelope. She opened it casually, like it was a menu. Asterisk, she skimmed. It wasn't outrageous. Just insulting. Clauses about inheritance, joint accounts, divorce contingencies. Even restrictions on Ava's right to future family trust shares unless she proved good character. It wasn't a prenup, it was a declaration of suspicion. Asterisk, Margaret spoke again, this time slower. Asterisk, I've ensured the terms are fair, and if you care about Michael, if you love him as you say you do, you'll sign it, quietly, respectfully. Ava closed the envelope and stood. Do you think money is what I'm after? She asked. Asterisk, I think women have motivations, Margaret replied, and some of them are built on ambition. Asterisk, Ava leaned in slightly. Then you should understand me better than anyone. Asterisk, Margaret's eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected pushback. She had expected pleading, maybe anger, but not quiet strength. Asterisk, if you walk away from this, Margaret warned, the wedding doesn't happen. Michael won't go against me. He loves me. Asterisk, and I love him, Ava said. But love doesn't mean silence. And it definitely doesn't mean submission. She tucked the envelope into her purse and straightened her shoulders. I'll consider it, she said. But just so we're clear, if you force me to sign something to prove I'm not after your money, then maybe it's your family, not me, that has something to hide. Asterisk, and with that, Ava turned and walked away, heels sharp, head high, and every ounce of composure perfectly controlled. Asterisk behind her. Margaret remained seated, still calm but, for the first time, uncertain. Ava didn't tell Michael that night. Not yet. She needed to think. Not because she doubted his love, but because she now doubted his mother's restraint. And in games like these, silence was the most dangerous power of all. Asterisk that night. Ava sat on her balcony with a glass of wine and looked up at the stars. Somewhere inside her bag sat a document designed to belittle her. And somewhere inside her veins ran the blood of a woman who owned empires. Asterisk, what Margaret didn't know, couldn't know, was that the girl she saw as a threat was an heiress, a billionaire's daughter, and she'd spent her entire life learning to keep that fact hidden from people who measured worth by inheritance. Asterisk soon, the world would know, but for now she waited and she planned. The Mitchell estate had never looked so polished. Asterisk crystal chandeliers glistened. The imported mahogany dining table stretched like a runway of wealth, lined with silverware that had likely never touched a dishwasher. Classical music floated softly through hidden speakers as servers in tuxedos refilled champagne flutes. This was the rehearsal dinner before the wedding, a final public show before two families were meant to become one. Asterisk. But this wasn't just a dinner. Asterisk, it was Margaret's. Theater. Asterisk, she had curated every detail from the guest list to the wine pairings. Politicians, socialites, real estate tycoons, they were all there, smiling through their teeth and glancing curiously at Ava Carter, the poised, quiet woman sitting beside Michael Mitchell, the black woman, the outsider. Asterisk, Ava had felt every glance, heard every whispered comment barely masked behind napkins and champagne bubbles. Asterisk, she's beautiful, but not what I pictured. Asterisk, I heard she came from nothing. Probably why she's so polished now. Asterisk, they say she's in logistics. What does that even mean? Asterisk, Michael was oblivious to most of it, caught in conversations with old friends and groomsmen. But Ava wasn't. She noticed everything, every smirk, every flick of judgment, every person who shook her hand with hesitation as if afraid of what she represented. Asterisk, and then came the moment she knew would arrive. Asterisk, Margaret stood, raising her glass. A smile as smooth as the pearls around her neck. Asterisk, everyone, she said, her voice commanding attention like a queen in a ballroom. I just want to say how thrilled I am for this union. Michael has always been our pride. And while love often surprises us, we trust he's making the right choice. Asterisk, there it was. A compliment dressed in condescension. Asterisk, Ava glanced toward the head server, who gave her a subtle nod. It was time. Asterisk, she stood slowly, her gown shimmering in the soft light. The room quieted. Conversations halted. Even Margaret blinked, not expecting Ava to interrupt her spotlight. Asterisk, if I may. Ava began, her voice steady. I'd like to thank the Mitchell family for hosting such a beautiful evening. And I wanted to say something publicly that I've kept private for a long time. Asterisk, Margaret's smile froze. A few guests exchanged curious glances. Asterisk, I've been honored to love Michael. Ava continued, and to be welcomed at least in gesture by this family. But I know that behind closed doors there have been concerns about motives, about money, about where I come from. Asterisk, now the room was still, no breathing, no forks clinking. Just Ava's voice, now layered with something deeper truth. Asterisk, I was asked to sign a prenuptial agreement, she said calmly. I was told it was for protection. I didn't take offense. I understand how legacies work. Asterisk, Margaret shifted in her seat, but Ava didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the room. Asterisk, but tonight I wanted to share a little context, not to impress, not to challenge, just to clarify. Asterisk, she turned and gestured to the butler, who handed her a leather-bound folder. Ava opened it gently and handed the contents to Margaret. Asterisk at the top of the first page in bold black ink were the words Asterisk Carter Global Holdings, Inc. Private Asset Portfolio Summary, asterisk below it, rows of figures, properties, equity holdings, patents, international investments, charitable foundations, and then Ava Monroe Carter, sole heir, net worth $8.4 billion USD. Asterisk Margaret's eyes widened, her face slowly draining of color. The room erupted in gasps. I never needed Michael's money, Ava said, her tone still soft. I signed the prenup this morning. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to honor your wishes, Margaret. Now she looked directly at her. And because I knew sooner or later you'd find out who I really was. And I wanted you to remember that I didn't have to. That I chose to remain quiet until tonight. Asterisk Michael looked stunned. He had known Ava was wealthy, but not this, not billionaire level. Not empire-level. Asterisk Margaret was frozen. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the paper down. Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. Ava turned to the guests. I don't share this to flaunt it. I've spent my life watching people lose their humanity chasing money. I chose logistics and social impact over family empire. But I won't be treated like a charity case or a threat. Or a woman lucky to be in this room. Asterisk she turned back. To Michael, her eyes finally softening. Asterisk, I love you. Not because I need you, but because I choose you. Asterisk Michael stood slowly. The room was still silent. Asterisk he took her hand and whispered, You just became the most powerful woman this family's ever seen. Asterisk Ava smiled. No, I've always been. They just didn't know. Margaret remained seated as the dinner resumed, but her world had shifted. Everything she thought she controlled, the image, the power, the narrative had been shattered by one woman's restraint and revelation. Asterisk she had misjudged Ava not because of what she lacked, but because of what she never bothered to ask. And now the room no longer looked at Ava with suspicion. They looked at her with awe. Asterisk. It was past midnight when a soft knock echoed through the presidential suite at the Ashton Hotel. Asterisk Ava stood barefoot near the balcony, her silk robe tied loosely as the night air drifted through the open glass door. She had been watching the city lights processing, the chaos, the silence, the shift in the way people now looked at her from outside her. To heiress. Asterisk she didn't turn around when she heard the knock again. She already knew who it was. Margaret Mitchell. Not the woman who spoke in polite cruelty and drank tea with controlled precision, but the mother of Michael Mitchell, a woman who had spent her life preserving the illusion of control. And tonight, she had lost it all. Ava walked slowly to the door and opened it. Margaret stood in the hallway, stripped of her armor. No pearls, no designer shawl, no staff trailing behind her. Just a middle-aged woman in a pale cardigan, clutching a purse. She didn't seem to know what to do with. Asterisk, may I come in? She asked, voice almost human. Asterisk Ava stepped aside. Of course. Asterisk Margaret entered quietly, scanning the room like she'd never stepped into a place she didn't own. Ava watched her pause near the window, searching for the words. Asterisk, I didn't sleep, Margaret said finally. Asterisk, I figured, Ava replied calmly, walking to the bar and pouring a glass of water. Want some? Asterisk Margaret shook her head. I've had enough to drink for one lifetime. Silence. Then finally, Margaret sat on the edge of the couch and exhaled. Asterisk, I don't know where to start. Asterisk, that's rare for you, Ava said. Gently but firmly. Asterisk Margaret looked down. I owe you an apology. Asterisk Ava said nothing. She let her sit in it. Asterisk, I judged you, Margaret continued. From the second you walked into our home, I saw what I wanted to see. A woman who didn't fit, who didn't belong. Not because of your skin, though, God help me, maybe that too. But because you threatened the idea of what I thought a Mitchell bride should look like. Asterisk. And what should she look like? Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Asterisk Margaret's eyes welled up. Not with tears, but with shame. Like, me, like my mother, contained, predictable, from the same clubs, the same churches, the same donors, but you weren't just different, you were better. Asterisk, Ava blinked. That last word hung in the air like thunder. Asterisk, you didn't need us. You never did. And I think that scared me more than anything. Because if you're not marrying into us for money or status, then maybe my son loves you for something I don't understand. And maybe that makes you more of a Mitchell than I'll ever be. Asterisk, Ava walked slowly toward her, placing the untouched glass of water on the table. Asterisk, you asked me to sign a prenup, not to protect your son, but to control me. Margaret didn't deny it. And now that you know the truth, what do you want from me? Ava asked. Asterisk, Margaret's hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. Forgiveness. Asterisk, Ava sat across from her, her posture calm. Controlled, regal. Asterisk, I forgive you, she said. But I don't forget. Asterisk, Margaret nodded. That's fair. Asterisk, and for the record, Ava added, I signed the prenup because I love Michael, not because I needed anything from your family. Asterisk, Margaret swallowed hard. I believe you now. Asterisk, Ava leaned forward. You see, Margaret, power isn't about money. It's not about who controls the narrative or writes the checks. True power is knowing who you are and never needing to prove it. Margaret's eyes welled up now, truly. I was wrong, she whispered. Ava stood, placing a hand gently on Margaret's shoulder. Yes, you were, but tonight, you walked into a room and saw me for the first time, and that means something. Asterisk, Margaret looked up. Do you think we'll ever be family? Ava paused. I think, she said softly, family is built, not inherited. Asterisk, Margaret smiled faintly, for the first time without defense. It wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the one she had earned. Asterisk, as she stood to leave, she turned. Once more at the door. Asterisk. Thank you for your grace. Asterisk, Ava nodded. Just promise me one thing. Asterisk. Anything. Asterisk. Treat the next woman who walks through your door like she belongs, even if she doesn't remind you of yourself. Asterisk, Margaret nodded slowly, closed the door behind her, and walked away smaller than she had ever seemed before. Ava stood alone again. Asterisk, not broken. Not angry, just still. She wasn't just marrying into legacy, she was reshaping it. The chapel stood like a quiet jewel atop the cliffs of Monterey Bay, its old stone walls kissed by ocean breeze and wrapped in golden morning light. It wasn't one of the Mitchell family's traditional venues. It wasn't their family church. It didn't have the Mitchell name carved into pews or stained glass. It was Ava's choice. Michael had insisted. If we're going to build a new life, he had told his mother weeks ago, we start it where Ava feels peace, not where your legacy casts shadows. Asterisk, and to her credit perhaps still humbled by that unforgettable dinner, Margaret had simply nodded and said, wherever she walks, my son belongs. Asterisk, the chapel was filled with guests from two very different worlds. Michael's side wore expensive pastels and timeless diamonds. Ava's side brought color, warmth, and laughter. Her mother, Ava Carter, stood near the front with quiet elegance, wearing a deep purple dress and a subtle smile that held decades of pain and power. Asterisk, she had built Carter Global Holdings from ashes after her husband's death, after being told by investors that a black woman from Nigeria could never run a Fortune 500 firm. She had done it anyway. And now, she watched her daughter walk down the aisle, not as someone giving up her name, but as someone becoming a force that couldn't be ignored. Asterisk, Ava entered the chapel slowly, her gown simple yet breathtaking. It wasn't branded, it wasn't couture. It was custom designed by a woman-owned firm in Atlanta that she had invested in 5 years ago, long before they were famous. Every step she took echoed louder than Margaret's family name ever had. The crowd turned, standing not just in admiration but in silence. Reverence. She passed rows of guests who had once whispered behind napkins, now caught in awe. Asterisk, and at the end of the aisle stood Michael, his eyes wet, his hands trembling, his smile growing wider with every step she took. He had grown too. This journey had changed him. He had watched the woman he loved be dissected, doubted, and disrespected, and never once did she lose her grace. Instead, she made him stronger. She showed him that love wasn't about shielding someone. It was about walking beside them through storms you never saw coming. When Ava reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "I don't deserve you." She whispered back, "I'm not here because you deserve me. I'm here because you see me." The vows were private, intimate, and raw. No rehearsed lines, no poetic flourishes. Just promises built from fire and fought for peace. When the officiant asked, "Do you, Michael?" He didn't wait. "I do," he said, almost laughing through his tears. And when he turned to Ava asking, "Do you, I always have?" She answered, The crowd applauded as the kiss sealed a union that no contract, no surname, no empire could define. After the ceremony, the guests spilled out into the sun-drenched courtyard where a jazz quartet played Ava's late father's favorite song. Margaret stood near a fountain, watching her son and his wife dance, unsure if she was part of this joy or simply witnessing it. Ava approached her slowly, alone. No audience, no spotlight. Margaret turned. "You look like a woman I would have feared once." Ava smiled softly. "And now?" Margaret took a deep breath. "Now, I see the daughter I never imagined, but one I would be proud to call family." Ava extended her hand. Margaret took it. For the first time, not lightly, not politely, but fully. A handshake between equals. That night, under string lights and golden California dusk, speeches were made, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the vineyard air. Ava stood beside her husband, no longer just a name whispered with suspicion, but a woman fully seen, not because of the billions behind her, not because of the drama they overcame, but because she walked into a world designed to keep her small and stood taller than them all. The last line of the night came from Ava Carter, whispered into Ava's ear before the newlyweds left. "You didn't just marry into power, my daughter. You taught it how to evolve." Ava smiled and walked into her new life, not with a changed name, but with a changed narrative.